maybe they can get funded in a third-tier market. It means if you have an innovative idea as big as Facebook, as big as Tesla, as big as Ethereum, or EOS, or any of these things, that idea can now come from here. The Philippines isn't just a market that can copy other things. The Philippines has the potential to create the next Google now. It can create extraordinary organizations that can export technology anywhere in the world because capital formation has been disrupted in a way where the world is now your oyster.
...2018.
And that goes for women too.
We're seeing a lot more governments, policymakers, central bankers view this blockchain and cryptocurrency with varying perspectives. Which countries do you feel have been approaching it appropriately, where it's striking a balance between protecting the public with regard to some bad elements that are out there, but at the same time creating enough opportunity for innovation for startups and entrepreneurs who really want to drive innovation? The US historically has been a leader, or looked upon as a leader, especially from an SEC standpoint when it comes to policy. How do you feel they've been handling it, and how is the world reacting to how they've been handling it?
Well, I'd like to say first that I think almost every government and almost every regulator in the world has done a good job. They've all been open to innovation. And our first instincts as human beings is to fear that which we don't understand. And certainly things that have been portrayed in the media as negatively as we have as an industry for a long time, that's changing, fortunately. It wouldn't have been unusual to see them come down with a heavy hand. And almost every government and every regulator in the world has kept a at least somewhat open mind and is trying to encourage and permit, some degree of innovation and to allow that to be fostered. So everyone's done a pretty good job, far better than I would have ever anticipated. I expected far more and many more challenges than we've experienced as an industry. It's actually gone pretty smoothly, considering how innovative and controversial this has been to many people for some time. Because it's confusing. Just understanding what is a blockchain takes people a long time to understand. It's like describing the internet in the early days. And the internet in the early days was vilified too. I mean, Newsweek by 1995 said the internet was going to fail. It was really only used by criminals, and it was a bad fad. By the year 2000, when the internet bubble burst, everybody said the internet was dead. Okay, maybe, there's some academic use cases, but there's no businesses that will ever be created on the internet. That was in 2001. So anytime you have an emerging industry that's so novel and so different than anything else you've ever seen, there's a steep learning curve. And so I want to compliment governments and regulators all over the world for, not reacting harshly or quickly. But who are the leaders? I'd say the U.S. is unfortunately not leading. I mean, they've done a good job, but they could do a far better job. The problem in the U.S. is there's a lot of regulatory uncertainty. And regulatory uncertainty, anyone that has done business for a while understands business people don't like uncertainty. I'd rather know it's illegal. I'd rather know it's not okay than the I don't know. Uncertainty is actually more scary than clarity. And so it's important, if you want innovation to occur, is to create a framework that says we're going to permit for innovation under the following guidelines and the following circumstances. Create a clear set of rules. Make it clear for innovators what they can or can't do. And you can change that over time. Build sandboxes. Create environments that allow for innovation to occur. The Industrial Revolution, created the prosperity that exists in America. A lot of the innovation that's come out of America today is because so much internet and technology innovation occurred there. As a nation, it's very important not to miss the next wave. It can make or break you and have very long-term implications upon the circumstances and outlook that your entire constituents of people have. And so the only thing I would encourage America to do is create some regulatory clarity so that the innovators know what they can and can't do, so the investors know what they can and can't invest in. Asia is kind of leading the world right now in a lot of ways, but the first wave has been the markets that are in the game of what they call regulatory arbitrage. The Maltas, the Gibraltars, the Cayman Islands, the Barbados, the Bermudas, those groups are the ones that have been doing it best. But that's to be expected because their nations depend on this. That's their nation's, way that it differentiates itself. It says we're going to permit innovation, we're going to allow companies that are, pushing the boundaries to incorporate here and do business here. Without that, they would be nothing but tourist destinations. And unfortunately, there's not enough tourism to support all of those places. So they were kind of wave one, but those markets don't have large enough populations of people to really matter, in terms of the long-term development. Japan obviously has done a great job. Right now, it's often 2 steps forward, 1 step back, so things are not perfect there today. But Japan, has done a lot of great work. I would look closely at the things they've been doing, and I think that's because of Mt. Gox. They had one of the first major scandals occur, on their soil, which forced regulators in 2014 to become deeply familiar with this technology and its potential. So they had a big head start. I think the Japanese people also take pride in the fact that Bitcoin and the blockchain's creator's name is Satoshi Nakamoto. I think they can arguably take credit for it being a Japanese product, even if Satoshi is just a pseudonym. I would if I was them. So Japan has been doing some very good things. Bitcoin is legal tender there. It's legal currency. I think Korea is doing a pretty good job. But again, these are mature economies. It's going to be always a bit mixed bag. Singapore has been doing a very good job, but there's still, a long ways to go. The Philippines now has its special economic zone. We're seeing wonderful actions taken by the government here and by regulators here. And if I were the Philippines and I were advising regulators today, the advice I would give them is to study what other countries are doing. China as well, but China's building walled gardens. I don't think the Philippines should imitate what's being done in China, not to criticize them. It's not a criticism. They're a very big population that, can build their own kind of walled garden economy. The benefit to a place like the Philippines is to not have that. It's to have interoperability between other Southeast Asian nations and other parts of the world. I would study Japan, Korea, and Singapore closely. But I'd say the Philippines stands to benefit more than any of those countries, more than the US, because the need here is so great. This is a time where if I were a Filipino regulator or the Filipino government, I'd be saying now is a time to take a position of leadership. Study everyone else, but figure out how this is going to benefit you most, because you stand to benefit the most, which means this is your opportunity to lead. This is your time not to follow everyone else, but to become pioneers. Because there's the potential right now for this to become a lighthouse. There is the potential right now for this to become a leading market, if not the leading market in the world, that everybody else should be following by demonstrating and proving actual impact. Demonstrating that this is improving the quality of lives for millions or tens of millions of people. And that's real. That's what I would be looking at if I were here.
The amount of ICO funding has increased 200-fold between 2015 to 2017, and again has increased 3-fold between 2017 to the first half of 2018. Adoption has lagged somewhat. what do you think will drive this next phase, this adoption phase, for blockchain to become almost invisible to users, but they will feel really the value that decentralization can bring to them?
Yeah, so the last 10 years of the development of this ecosystem has been largely prototyping. It's been building the bridges, the roads, the tunnels, the underlying infrastructure on which we can build applications. And these have been prototypes. You know, it's not all there yet. We're still in a prototype phase, but it's maturing rapidly. Until we get out of the prototype phase, you can't scale many things. Very few of the blockchains can even scale it all today. And private keys, if you lose your key and losing everything you have, it's not something that's accessible. It's a lot like the internet was before you had an internet browser, before you had an email client, before you had things to do on the web. You know, we're now just entering that phase where products can be developed well enough that an average person can use it and feel comfortable. We're just entering the phase where the infrastructure is able to scale to meet the needs of the many. And so that time is now. You're here at the right time. You know, it's over the next 12 and 24 months that we're going to start to see real scaling of applications. I think that financial inclusion is one of the big ones. I think that it's going to meet other market needs. The only time you ever see something scale rapidly, you know, where you see numbers go from, you know, 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 100, or, you know, 1 million to 10 million to 100 million, you only see that when the need is great, when products or services are being developed that improve your life in that area by an order of magnitude. People don't line up in droves to save a point, to save 2%. You know, it doesn't work that way. You have to radically be producing products or services that are so much better than the status quo if you want to see mass adoption. You know, again, here in the Philippines, you've got 80 million people that need better financial services. You know, we're talking about 5 billion people on the planet that need it as well. And so what happens here, you know, can quickly move to meet those needs all over the world. So that's obviously one of the big, obvious ones. And like Coins.ph, most of the people I imagine in the Philippines that use it today don't know that they're using blockchain. They probably don't even know they're using cryptocurrency. And they don't have to. You don't need to know how to make a cell phone. You don't need to know all the components in it or how to develop the software to benefit from it. What they need to know is, how is this going to make my life better? The plumbing and the underlying technology is not really relevant to the consumer. It's relevant to the developer. It's relevant to the financiers. But consumers just need to know how you're going to make their lives better, how you're building products and services that are substantially better than, you know, what exists currently. And there's a lot of other areas. Insurance products here, I think, was mentioned. I've been told it's less than 2% of the population here have life insurance. From an economic perspective, any mature or maturing economy has many marketplaces, many exchanges. The Philippines only has a stock exchange. It doesn't have a debt or bond exchange. It doesn't have REITs or real estate exchanges. Look at any other developed economy. You have a number of exchanges serving a number of the essential markets that support a maturing or a really developing economy. You know, areas like that are the case. Identity, land titling, electricity, especially on a place that's, you know, got islands of this nature, telecommunication needs. I mean, the list go on and on and on. In the same way the internet has impacted every person's life and every business on the planet, the blockchain is going to do the same thing, but more so. I believe the internet as we know it is going to fail. I believe the internet as we know it is going away. I believe there will be no World Wide Web as it exists today, because the web or the internet is broken. I call it the internet of information because the only thing it does well is it's democratized the movement of data and information. And because it's insecure, because when the internet was first being developed, The technology or the cryptography that was needed to secure it was known, but the computer processing capability at the time didn't exist. They couldn't secure the internet. When the computer processing got far enough along to secure it, too much had already been built. It was too late. The foundation of the internet had already been laid. And so everything we've been building the last 30 years have been being built on sand. It's been being built on a faulty foundation, which is why security implications of the internet continue to be problems. It's the reason why we don't build financial systems on the internet that are not centralized. It's the reason why we don't do voting on the internet. It's the reason we don't do energy or infrastructure on the internet. Because the internet is broken, the World Wide Web. And when you think of a web, what is a web? The web is a place that spiders live, spider webs. You think of it as a dark place, something you normally don't want to walk through. What is a blockchain? What is the technology that is going to upgrade the internet to bring about the new internet? What is it? What is a blockchain? A blockchain brings security. A blockchain brings transparency. A blockchain brings trust. A blockchain brings efficiency. A blockchain brings truth and light. It brings all of the things that we need so that we can build all of the things that makes the world a better place on this infrastructure, which is why it's going to be such a big deal.
So I'll ask Brock one last question, and then we'll open the floor to everyone. So please think through what questions, and now that Brock is here, it would be good to learn from him. My last question for you, Brock, is more than 10 countries have announced a sovereign crypto coin. Philippines included is doing a peso crypto coin. Facebook has assigned David Marcus, former PayPal president, as the full-time head of their cryptocurrency/blockchain division. We both know that more and more companies are planning their own ICO and are working on their own blockchain initiatives, very large market cap ones. One of the sort of core tenets of Satoshi Nakamoto's Bitcoin protocol was the concept or approach of decentralization. Yet we're seeing very strong, powerful, well-established giants from governments to mega corporations now really looking to overinvest in the space. Fast forward 15, 20 years from now, what does the landscape look like?
So I'm also one of the founders of Tether, and we put the first real world asset on the blockchain with the US dollar. We're doing $2 to $3 billion a day of transactions, $2 trillion a year, the second most traded currency after Bitcoin. And my idea at the time was, how do you drive crypto adoption? How do you drive Bitcoin adoption? Knowing the need for these types of services in the developing world were so great, but also recognizing that no one understood Bitcoin, and people in the developing world were not going to trust Bitcoin. I also recognized they all wanted the US dollar. And so let's put the dollar on the blockchain, let's put the dollar in a crypto wallet, and let's make the US dollar accessible to everyone in the world. That was the underlying idea. And that it would also be a public utility to our industry. It would allow you to easily transfer currency from exchange to exchange in its fiat form. And the hope was that that would also teach governments that they can do the same. Because if governments started to do this, if you started to tokenize the peso, you could see ubiquitous financial inclusion using new infrastructure. It was never a project to make money from my perspective. It was a project to onboard the developing world, create a utility for the existing industry, and demonstrate to governments they can do the same thing. And so 15 years from now, I think we're looking at near ubiquitous penetration of blockchain. I think that we will be far on the way, if not done with the entire upgrade of the internet itself. I think that in 15 years it's possible that everything will be running on the blockchain and there will be no more websites. If you go to steemit.com, for example, that is not a website. It looks like a website. It's indistinguishable to the user that it's a website, but it's actually a block explorer. And that's eventually what everything is going to look like. There will be no websites. Though it'll look the same. It'll feel the same in many ways. But this is back to what is the back end versus the front end. And users won't know the difference, But I think that we're looking at ubiquitous financial inclusion in the world 15 years from now, largely because of the work that we are all doing. I think that we're looking at making the world a far better place. I think we're looking at upgrading the lives of billions of people. I'm often quoted by saying that a billionaire to me is not someone with $1 billion, but someone that's positively impacting the lives of 1 billion people. 15 years from now, I think we'll all be able to call ourselves billionaire by my definition.
Does anyone have any questions for the panel?
Anderson.
Hi, Brock. Yeah, a side project that I'm toying around in my head right now for emerging markets is, do you believe that universal basic income plus decentralized autonomous taxation would make sense?
I don't like the term universal basic income, though I think the idea is important. I prefer the term universal basic sustenance. I think that the universal basic income term is too loaded, too charged with, emotion on both sides. And I think that income isn't probably the right term. I think we're moving into a world due to AI and other things where jobs are going to be going away more and more and more. The Philippines, that is largely a call center, that has a lot of call centers, obviously is going to be disrupted in the near term. AI is going to eliminate all the call centers soon. We're talking about in a matter of years. And people that are going into jobs to learn language for the purposes of that career path are going to be disrupted, but they're not alone. A lot of industries are. And so as a result of that, we're going to need to invent systems and safety nets to take care of people in ways that we never had before, while at the same time creating tools that allow for creating prosperity. We currently live in a world of scarcity and a scarcity mindset. I think that most people are playing the game that I call compounding interest. Compounding interest meaning the pursuit of money, generally for their own selfish interests. I'm playing the game of compounding impact. How can I invest my time, my energy to make a positive impact on the lives of others? And so I think that we need to move away from a scarcity mentality to building a world of abundance. And that idea, for example, is going to be an important one. How do we build systems so that people have their basic needs met? But then there's still a strong incentive from there to try and create the life that you want for yourself. I don't think a world where we're jobless, where every job as we know it today is eliminated, is a bad thing. I believe that human beings are inherently good and want to do good things. And it's a lot of the bad influence of the world in which we've created that inspires them to do otherwise. What do you do when you are given your time back? What do you do when your basic needs are met? Where you don't have to deal with survival instincts anymore? You probably figure out what your calling is. I like to use a number of Japanese terms to describe some of these ideas in honor of Satoshi, having chosen a Japanese name. Ikigai being one of them. Ikigai is a Venn diagram where you've got a ring or a circle that's talking about what you love, what you're good at, and what the world needs. Finding the intersection of those three things is finding your life's purpose. And once you've found your life's purpose, money doesn't really matter anymore. Once you're doing what you love, it doesn't matter even if you're succeeding at it. It doesn't even matter if you're making money from it, as long as your basic needs are being met, you're gonna love it. You know, and if you're good at it too, you're gonna wanna continue to do it, and often what you're good at are the things that come to you naturally. I like to say that we're all superheroes, or have the potential to be, and we have superpowers or the potential to have them. But what is a superpower? Malcolm Gladwell talks about the things that you've invested 10,000 hours into. Your superpowers are the things that you've devoted your life to. The skills that you've uniquely developed. Those skills are what uniquely make you you. They are what makes you special. So what you're good at, what your superpowers are. And then figuring out how to apply those things to the world in a way that's going to impact others positively. And so I think that you're going to find more people in that pursuit. I also like the Japanese concept of Kaizen. Kaizen is to do things as well as you can. I don't know if any of you have seen this pyramid, but it's got 3 names on it. It says good, fast, cheap, pick 2. So at the end of World War II, or during World War II, one of the main things that the US did that led to the war ending the way that it did is America got very good at building things fast and cheap. And the Germans were building things much better. But America's ability to produce arms and infrastructure at a much faster rate, eventually they beat them with quantity over quality. The problem was after World War II, that became the business model for a lot of businesses in the United States that then became exported all over the world, where we kept making mediocre things, and then we supersized it. And another thing that we need to change in our lives is to stop making mediocre things. We have to return to making good things. We have to start making great things again. We don't just build things well enough. You know, you make things as well as you possibly can, and that's this concept of Kaizen. It's continual improvement. It's to approach situations and do your best work, not just good enough to get the job done. And when you wake up tomorrow, you attempt to do it even better. And as we start to implement these ideologies into our daily lives, you know, I think this is how we as a species thrive.
Thank you. I'm really enjoying this discussion. It's awesome. You talked a lot about the democratization of investment participation, and I just want to talk about ICOs and where they're going now. You know, what are next steps? Because I agree that the exciting thing about ICOs was that it suddenly gave people an opportunity to have their ideas funded where traditionally they never would have even been seen by anyone. And I think that projects that foster financial inclusion are going to be born of that type of that funding. But we've also seen a problem where, because it is an unregulated market, it's also attracted a lot of cowboys, a lot of blatant scams, a lot of uneducated investors who have put a lot of money into things without doing any due diligence, without even looking at a white paper where even the white paper was written properly. And unfortunately, we've seen, ICOs I think that are less than what they were in August or September last year now in terms of investment. We've seen a lot of the SEC crack down on a lot of ICOs that were blatant scams. And also the current downturn in ETH, a lot of people are attributing that to ICOs cashing out to be able to fund their projects because there's still not the utility that they need to be able to fund their projects with crypto. So how do we actually ensure that moving forward this space actually remains democratized and inclusive, as opposed to just moving to having more securitized tokens, which seems to be what all VCs are looking for now, and then the other ones still putting money into crypto?
Well, I first of all would like to correct one statement, which is it is not unregulated. It's very regulated in almost every country in the world, and that's a misnomer that it's unregulated. There's not bespoke laws, there's not new laws that have been written to, encourage more of this behavior, but there were a lot of laws in almost every country in the world that have been written historically that do apply. And make sure that you always get legal advice before doing anything. because you might not know all the laws that were written in the early 1900s or the mid 1900s or in the 1900s that might apply to what you're attempting to do here. And the implications of doing that incorrectly are severe. And ignorance of the law is no excuse. So please make sure that you're well advised. Make sure that you have lawyers that look at everything. Don't say just because you saw someone else do it, it must be okay. That is not okay. And this is very important. This could, in your pursuit of trying to make the world a better place, don't mess up your own life due to ignorance. But yeah, so what's going on in the ICO market? Yeah, you've got a bunch of, you went through a hype cycle. The internet was just like this in 1999. Every project that had a business plan to build an internet company was being funded by everyone, every taxi driver. I mean, we went through a very, very similar cycle. And in the year 2000, the market crashed. And 90% or more of the projects failed. It's probably closer to 99%. But, let's say 90% of the projects failed because they were mediocre. It's back to the last statement I made. You have a lot of people that were, just whipping things together, racing to market because they saw a window of opportunity to get some money because money was being handed out easily. And, there's going to be a reckoning. I don't know if that's now or a year from now or 2 years from now. Could be now. We're obviously in a market downturn. But that's inevitable. It will happen at some point. And as innovators, the best thing you can do is do your best work. Make great things, build good things. And unfortunately, that takes time. Whipping up a white paper and throwing out a website and launching a token, that model is not going to be sustainable. You're going to have to build great projects, and that probably means you're still going to need seed funding. You're probably going to have to still go out and raise a small amount of money in a more traditional sense to get to a minimally viable product and a real plan and a real team, to get the capital that you need. Fortunately, most of the scammers are going to get wiped out. A lot of the bad actors are going to get shut down. That's probably good for the ecosystem, though, depending upon where you are in your cycle, maybe bad timing. But such is life. You don't get to decide when the market opens. It has its hours. Unfortunately, in these types of industries, you don't know what those hours are going to be until the market decides. But I don't think this market's going away. We might be in for a long winter or not. All you can do is do your best work, and none of us have control over the market.